Hi, welcome to Horror Score. We're your hosts, Jesse and
Vanessa.
And this week's episode is
The Descent.
As you may have been able to tell from the cool, spooky set that we have put together. Couple of things to get out of the way first. We now have an email address. So if you want to get a hold of us, whether it's to recommend a movie, maybe you made a movie and you want to do an interview on the show, or you just want to mail us a gift to add to our collection of stuff, that's how you can get a hold of us. So that is horrorscorereview@gmail.com. What do you got?
Or if you don't have a Hotmail account, because email, that's so old, we have a Twitter page too now.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So if people want to get in touch with us publicly, request maybe that Jesse regrows his mustache, just off the top of my head, or
it's gone. You may have noticed that this is the first episode without the mustache. If you go back to episode 1, it's just barely coming in. You can see like a shadow of it.
Humble beginning.
And then it just grows over 19 or 20 or so episodes. But one more thing before we get started, just a little plug. Who would have known that Spalding High School's class of 98 would have 2 graduates that 20-something years later, within a month of each other, would start some sort of a weekly horror show. So my friend Jay has put together a podcast with his friend Shane, and it is called Make Me Shudder. It is available on Spotify and I believe it's Apple Podcasts. I've already listened to the first 4 episodes. By the time you're seeing this, they're probably going to have 25 episodes out.
They're fun. They're going through all of the movies available on Shudder, which is a wonderful streaming service, in alphabetical order, and reviewing every single movie that they have.
Now I asked them, I said, what are you going to do when like the first month goes by and they've added and taken away movies and they've messed up your plan? And they said that they've got it all taken care of and figured out. So you'll have to stay tuned, subscribe to their channel and see what they do. They are going to be on a future episode. We're going to review a movie together and we're going to be on their podcast. Well, let's get to scoring this movie. So what we've got here is 2006's The Descent, a 99-minute R-rated film.
It actually came out technically in Scotland at the Dead by Dawn Film Festival in July of 2005. It didn't come out in the US until August 2006.
Well, that makes sense because when I was looking up stuff about this movie, I kept seeing that it was 2005 and then other sites would say 2006 and then 2005, so that clears things up a little bit.
You're welcome.
There is a not rated version, and that's actually what we watched. It's billed as the director's cut. This is only my 3rd watch of the movie. What was yours?
It was my first.
I
had to beg him to watch it.
I mean, I was happy to see this movie a 3rd time. It's a good horror film.
I agree.
As we get into story, the ending to the director's cut is very different. So we were sitting there watching this movie and I'm like, oh, here comes the ending. Here comes the ending. And I like the ending. And it didn't happen. And I was like, wait, no. So we had to go on YouTube and watch the real ending on the R-rated version to get the actual ending, which I think is much better, but we won't spoil any of it for you. Watch both of them and figure out which one you like more.
It was nice. It was like he was also watching it for the first time with me as well.
Yeah, I was like, wait, that's not the ending. This isn't what happened. So let's see. This is a Neil Marshall film. He wrote it and directed it. He did Dog Soldiers.
Tales of Halloween.
Yes, Tales from Halloween. I couldn't think of the other movie that he did. He did the 2019 Hellboy. So let's talk about the story. We've got, for the first half of this movie, more so, I mean, the first 57 minutes, this movie is super scary, and it hasn't even really turned into a horror movie yet. These 6 women go underground caving, and it's the most like stressed out I've been watching a movie since Frozen. Not Disney's Frozen, but the chairlift movie Frozen.
Well, that movie is stressful. You wonder, like, will...
So these women can't catch a break. They're underground, trying to find a way out of this cave system after a cave-in behind them. And 57 minutes later, this turns into an entirely different movie. It pulls it off just as well as From Dusk Till Dawn. And this is a good movie to trick somebody into watching a horror movie who doesn't like horror. Be like, oh, come watch this movie. It's going to be cool. It's a survival movie. And they will be very scared because this movie has a bunch of jump scares and they're like legitimate good quality jump scares. I gave this movie a 14 on story. What do you got for us?
I gave story an 11.
You didn't like it as much?
Well, maybe not as much as you did, but I did notice as we were getting into the movie and horror wasn't happening. I mean, we got some good jump scares, like you said, but I was still kind of waiting for that promise of the unknown. And it did deliver. Like I was definitely afraid for just the regular claustrophobia reasons
Terrifying.
that humans are afraid of. But I mean, anytime I see a movie with, those classic thrill seeker type people, I'm like, you had it coming. You just, you had no way of predicting this outcome.
Yeah, if those 6 girls had just stayed home and watched some horror movies together, they'd all be okay. You want to take us into villain?
Sure.
What do you think of these villains?
I gave the villains an 11 as well. The slimy, white, and blind. And if you've ever seen the beloved children's movie, Pan's Labyrinth.
It's not a children's movie.
I saw it as a child, so it is a children's movie. It looks a lot like the guy with the hands, with the eyeballs.
A little
in
bit.
Him.
Yeah. All right. And these monsters, they're called crawlers, I think is what they were referred to online. I don't know if that's official or not, or just what the community has been calling them, but I agree with you. I gave the villain an 11 as well. There's just only so much you can do with a scary monster that it has a motive in the sense that they want to eat and they want to kill you because
they're just trying to get by.
Yeah. I mean, you're in their cave and they're territorial. But I felt like an 11 was like, well, they are scary. They look cool, but there's not a lot to them. So I thought an 11 was totally fair for these crawlers.
Well, how did they do for horror? Or how did the movie do for horror with you? This
movie, I think, is consistently scary from very early on up until the end. If you're not panicking about the claustrophobia, there's some tight crawls, very similar to the remake of the Blair Witch Project. There's a scene where there's a girl crawling down this tight tunnel, and just in the theater, I was like, and it was bothering me so much. This movie, the same thing. You can see people squeezing down these tunnels, and I'm like, first of all, how does the cameraman get in there? Where is there room for a cameraman? And everything was just so boxed in. But then when the monsters come, honest, legit scares as well. So I gave this a 15 for being a legitimately scary movie, and I think all the jump scares work. What'd you give it?
I also gave it a 15.
Nice. Okay.
Because again, the actual scares, I jumped and flinched many times, but also it wasn't just scary in the horror. It also did that trick that a lot of horror movies do that adds another element where they had some family trauma going on with it, so there was an emotional layer underneath everything. It kind of reminded me of The Hills Have Eyes, but
the original or the remake?
The original.
Okay. So you want to take us into effects?
I do.
Let's do it.
So originally, while I was watching this, I gave it an 8. And I have to say it has some really great music. I originally gave it an 8 because it is not for people with bad vision like myself. This set right here is brighter than 90% of the movie. And so it was just really difficult to have to physically just strain to be able to understand what was going on. But then after we reviewed the movie originally, just doing basic research about the film, it turns out that they weren't actual caves. Oh. It was just an amazing set design by a man named Simon Bowles, and just the fact that you were questioning things like, how did they get the cameraman down there? And you never once thought, maybe it's not a real cave, because it is so convincing.
Never crossed my mind.
Yeah, it actually bumped my effects score up to a 10 instead, because man, was that a good setting. The lighting guy, we'd have some talks, but yeah, gotta give credit.
Okay. I gave it a 15. Um, the monsters looked good. There was a lot of excellent gore. Like when there are some bad injuries,
yeah.
bones sticking through legs.
Just a pit of gore.
And you're just like, oh, there's so many times where some of it looks very real.
Yeah.
The sets, I didn't know the sets were fake, so I didn't even factor that in. But the music is so good. It's David Gillian, who normally works with Chris Nolan on all his stuff. He did one of my favorite movies, Memento. More recently, he did Cabin in the Woods, not with Chris Nolan, but and I think he teamed up with Hans Zimmer for some of the Dark Knight stuff. But anyway, music sometimes feels like a member of the cast.
Yeah, it's like a good score is like steroids for a horror film. It just only adds to it. How about S Factor?
All right, the S Factor. If you're new to horror score,
nobody's new to horror score.
If you are new, S Factor is the category where we can add points for whatever reasons we want to. I chose to add 14 more points. One, because I loved the ending, the real ending, the R-rated ending. Didn't see it coming. And also for the movie taking so long to get to the horror part, but it's still good.
Yeah.
So it's like two separate movies. You've got this scary stuff happening, but it's not scary because there's monsters. It's scary because of like the claustrophobia. And then it becomes a totally different movie where all the same problems were there, but now there's these monsters trying to eat these people as well.
Right. But for me, what that did for the film was I stopped caring or wondering if people were going to get out, because I was like, you were already stuck down here and now something's trying to eat you. Like,
yeah, things go from bad to worse.
I know.
Like, these women can't catch
at that point I'd be like, does anybody have a gun? Is this a thing? Like, is there a point at which you would just, in an apocalypse, in any sort of extreme horrifying situation like this, that you would just say screw it and just end your life in a more controlled way than being torn apart?
No way. Fight to the end. Take out as many of those crawlers as you can and use the last bullet on the last one of them.
I don't know. I'm conserving my life for me. Well, for me on S Factor, I gave it 12 points because something that we haven't mentioned yet is that this entire cast is women. And it's not distracting or noticeable, and it's great. Just because, just an all-girls trip, the setup makes sense. You know, there's no real need for a man to be in this story, and I think the whole cast killed it.
I think they were all great. My only complaint would be they looked similar in all of their caving gear. So, as Vanessa said, it gets dark in the movie, and with their gear on during a lot of these scenes, they're like, who was that? Like, was that Beth? Was that Rebecca? Was that Holly? Was that Sam? And sometimes I had to wait until they were like, oh, something bad happened to this person. Like, oh, okay. Like, that was Rebecca. Got it.
Another reason I gave the S Factor 12 points was because of a killer opening, and then it just doesn't let up. It's not like they pull you in with this trick and then you have to wait for the last 10 minutes. It's like boom action from the beginning, and then even if something's not really happening, you're on edge because they do jump scares so well.
So normally we don't do movies that are as well known. We did Wishmaster for episode 10, but once every 10 episodes or so, like, we like to visit.
It's usually because I have overlooked a classic, and if we don't do it for the show, why do it,
Yeah. So if you're saying to yourself, like, yeah, I already knew this was a great movie.
Everybody knows to watch The Descent. That was my dad. My dad found out we were doing The Descent, and he was like, seems a little off-brand of you guys.
Yeah, when are you going to do Bog Creatures too? Never.
Maybe.
Before we go on, we're going to go to Vanessa's one-sentence synopsis.
You know, it might be a sentence and a question.
Okay.
This friend group, chock full of unresolved issues, goes spelunking in an unmapped cave system. What could possibly go wrong?
So I give this movie 69 horror score points.
And I give it 59.
Okay.
Which is a combined total of 64 points.
64 points sounds bad. Like if this was school and you get a 64 on a test, that's an F in most schools. Some schools it might not be, but on horror score that is a great score. IMDb gives this a 7.2, and Rotten Tomatoes gives it a 75%, and that is based off of over 200,000 user reviews. I went and read some of the reviews from the top critics, and I wanted to tip my computer over on the floor. Like, just a bunch of people bashing this movie for all the wrong reasons. Don't go read those reviews. So that's about all we have for today. So give us 15 minutes. We might save you 2 hours.
Stay spooky.